Across the galaxy, a strange signal ripples through the vast expanse of space, its frequency unlike any seen before. Old beacons and deep space stations begin to register a new pulse, one that doesn't match any known alien species or communication protocol. A series of garbled transmissions stretch across the dark void, and the message is clear enough despite the static. Fukoff, echoed repeatedly like a warning, or perhaps a declaration of intent. The word cuts through the silence like a blade and reverberates through the galactic network with chilling precision, and as the transmission spread, panic rises among the leaders of the galaxy's most powerful factions. The Zenith Dominion, the largest and most advanced empire in the known galaxy, is the first to react. Their top council meets in an emergency session to analyze the signal and determine its source. Their best minds are baffled. The word itself does not belong to any language they know. It is not a common curse or insult, but something more ancient, something that only disturbs the deeper recesses of their memories. It is as though it is a taunt directed specifically at them. Their intelligence networks are scrambled to locate the source, but there is nothing there, no signatures, no traces of ships or fleets. It is simply an echo bouncing off the void. Meanwhile, the Elcor Collective receives the same signal. Their leadership debates whether it's a sign of a new threat or some kind of elaborate ruse by rival factions. But one thing is certain, there is a tension in the air, something unspoken and terrifying. No other species in the galaxy has the audacity to deliver such a message, especially not one as simple as Fukoff. The message does not come with a fleet or a show of force, yet it is felt across the stars, as if the very fabric of space has been altered by its arrival. The Vraxian Empire is more direct. Their military commanders order their fleets to scan the region where the signal originated. Their probes detect faint traces of something that doesn't belong, faint ripples in the fabric of space itself. But the source is still elusive. It's almost as if the transmission was designed to be untouchable, as though it existed in a realm outside their comprehension, one where they had no dominion. The fleets are called back, as the signal persists like a beating drum of fate. For weeks, the galaxy waits in uneasy silence. The great powers of the galaxy all feel the tremor of something looming over them. Yet none can explain it. No one can understand what this strange word means, or why it's been sent, or who has sent it. The signal continues its relentless course across every channel and frequency, undeterred and unyielding, and despite the best efforts of galactic experts, no progress is made in deciphering its origins, or meaning. The galaxy's brightest minds are at a loss. They've never encountered anything like it. Then comes a sudden shift. A report from a Zenith scout ship that had been patrolling the far reaches of the galaxy. A single crew member stares out into the cold expanse of space and witnesses a sight that shakes him to his core. A fleet of sleek warships emerges from the nebula at the far edge of known space. Their designs, unfamiliar yet unmistakably human, and behind them, the void is left in eerie silence as the Fukoff message continues its cold march through the stars. The Zenith scout ship watches in horror as the fleet of unknown warships emerges from the nebula, their sleek silhouettes cutting through the darkness like shadows of death. No sign of distress, no warning, no communications, only the relentless advance of the ships in perfect formation. The scout captain immediately orders a retreat, but before the ship can even begin to turn around, the first wave of ships opens fire without hesitation. The energy beams slice through the emptiness of space with terrifying precision. The scout ship's engines flare, and the hull groans under the strain of evasive maneuvers. But it's no use. The ship is torn apart in an instant as the first volley impacts its shields. The crew's screams echo in the final moments before the void takes them. The fleet of mysterious warships doesn't slow. They don't even acknowledge the loss. They continue on their course, as though the destruction of the scout was a mere afterthought. The Zenith Dominion's communications network is flooded with urgent reports from other patrols. The word spreads faster than the ships themselves. The Terrans are back, and they are unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen before. The Zenith High Command scrambles into action. Their fleet commanders call for an immediate mobilization of every ship they can spare, but they know it's already too late. Their greatest strength is their vast armada, but the Terran warships are already cutting through their defenses with ease. Each strike is precise, surgical. The Terrans move like ghosts, appearing and vanishing before their enemies can even react. The fleet's attempts to retaliate only result in more destruction. As they watch their ships disintegrate in flashes of bright light, the Zenith realize they are powerless against this new enemy, and panic spreads like wildfire throughout their ranks. Meanwhile, the leaders of the Elcor Collective meet in an emergency session. The shockwaves of the Zenith defeat reverberate through the galaxy, and the Collective knows they cannot remain passive. Their own intelligence networks have failed to understand what the Terrans have become. They are a force of nature unlike any before them. Their weaponry is unlike anything seen before, capable of bypassing every defense the Elcor have ever developed, and their ships defy all conventional understanding. How can such a small force wield such overwhelming power? They are faced with the grim realization that the galaxy as they know it may have just shifted irreparably. The Vraxian Empire doesn't waste time with diplomacy. They launch their fleets in full force, determined to end this threat before it spreads any further, but their fleet fares no better than the Zeniths. The Terran ships appear in the Vraxian system. With the same unrelenting efficiency, they decimate an entire flotilla of battlecruisers with a single blast, and then begin a systematic destruction of their space stations and orbital fortresses. The Vraxians are forced to retreat and regroup. Their leaders now realize that diplomacy with the Terrans is no longer an option. Their message is clear. They are here not to negotiate, but to claim what they believe is theirs. A galaxy once dominated by power and strategy now faces the unimaginable. The Terrans have returned with a force unmatched, and the old powers of the galaxy are reeling from their first blow. They still don't know the full extent of what they are up against, but the unmistakable reality has set in. The Terrans are not the weak humans of old. They have evolved into something far more terrifying. And now the galaxy must come to terms with the unstoppable might of the Fukoff force. The galaxy quakes with the reality of the Terran. Return. Their message, simple yet chilling, reverberates through every corner of the known universe. We were once weak, but now we have come to remind you of the price of arrogance. The leaders of the galactic powers convene in a tense council chamber, their faces grim as they try to comprehend the magnitude of the threat they now face. The once untouchable Zenith Empire, shattered by a force that appeared out of nowhere and without warning. The Vraxians, who were once considered the most formidable military power in the galaxy, crushed with brutal efficiency, and the Elcor Collective now reeling from the shock of their helplessness. The council begins in chaos, the most powerful leaders of the galaxy shouting over one another, each offering their own theories and strategies, but all of them are ultimately dismissed by the grim reality that the Terrans are no longer the humble settlers they once were. They are a force of nature, unrestrained and unstoppable. Every attempt to analyze their tactics comes up empty. They seem to anticipate every move before it's made. They move like shadows, appearing and disappearing before fleets can react. Their ships too fast, their weapons too deadly. No one knows how they've gained such power or why they've returned, but one thing is certain. This is no simple skirmish. This is the beginning of something far more catastrophic. The Vraxian General Orcs is the first to speak, his voice heavy with regret. We underestimated them. He says, his words a bitter admission of the failure of his people. He looks toward the Zenith representative, who nods grimly. Our fleets are in disarray, says the Zenith commander. We can no longer afford to engage them head-on. Our ships are no match for theirs. Our best minds cannot fathom how they've developed such technology, nor how they strike with such devastating precision. He turns toward the Elcor, who remain silent in their corner, their dark eyes betraying no emotion. We must regroup. We must find a way to understand what we are facing before we can mount a counteroffensive. The Elcor leader Tal steps forward, his voice cold and calculated. We are facing a threat the likes of which we have never known, a species that has evolved beyond what we believed was possible. We cannot fight them in space. We must fight them on the ground. We need a way to weaken them from within. The others are silent for a moment, considering his words. He continues, we may not understand their technology, but we understand one thing. The Terrans are relentless. They will stop at nothing to achieve their goals. We need to find their weaknesses. The Council agrees to a risky plan to infiltrate the Terran forces using spies and saboteurs in the hopes of learning more about their technology and strategies. The risk is immense, and many argue it may not even be possible, but there is no other option. They must find some way to break the Terran resolve before it's too late. But even as the Council plans their next move, another transmission is sent out across the galaxy from the Fukoff force. It is a single broadcast, no words this time, only the same message repeated over and over. Fukoff. Each repetition seems to resonate with an unsettling certainty, a final declaration that echoes through every civilization's core. For the galactic powers, it is no longer just a warning. It is a promise, and the reality is sinking in fast. They cannot ignore the Terrans any longer, and every faction feels the weight of the unspoken question. What happens when the Terrans decide to come for you next? The galaxy braces itself as the Terran Fukoff force continues its relentless march across the stars with chilling precision. The first planet to fall under their might is Thraxar, a vital trade hub located at the intersection of several key trade routes. The once prosperous world is now a symbol of what the galaxy can expect. Should they resist the new order, the Terrans make their approach without fanfare. No grand speeches, no demands, just an overwhelming show of force that leaves the planet's defenders with no chance. Thraxar's orbital defenses are decimated within moments. The Terran warships emerge from Slitstream and immediately begin their assault. Each strike is surgical, as though they've mapped every weak point in the planet's defense grid down to the smallest detail. The inhabitants of Thraxar watch in stunned silence as their once mighty fleets crumble under the weight of the Terran onslaught. The sky is alight with flashes of green and blue as the Terrans unleash a barrage of weapons that cut through shields and armor like paper. The defenders attempt to retaliate, but their weapons seem powerless against the Terran fleet's superior technology. On the surface, panic sets in as the government of Thraxar scrambles to organize a defense. They have little hope of victory, but they are determined to resist for as long as possible. But even as their forces assemble, the Terrans have already landed elite assault teams on the ground within hours of their arrival. The first wave is a coordinated strike against key military and governmental structures, leaving no chance for retaliation. The Terran soldiers move with terrifying efficiency, their tactics unlike anything the Thraxar military has ever encountered. The civilians of Thraxar are caught in the crossfire, and their pleas for mercy go unanswered. The Terrans make no distinction between combatants and non-combatants. Their orders are clear: eliminate all resistance and subjugate the population. The planetary capital is razed within hours, and the streets are filled with the ruins of once proud buildings. The inhabitants are rounded up, placed under Terran control, and forced to submit to their new overlords. Back in the Galactic Council chambers, panic spreads as the leaders of the remaining empires realize the implications of what is happening. Thraxar was only the beginning. The Terrans are no longer engaging in isolated skirmishes. They are claiming worlds systematically and without mercy. The Zenith Dominion is the first to react, sending what remains of their fleet to the system in the hopes of recovering some semblance of honor and pushing back the invaders. But as they arrive, they are met with the horrifying sight of the planet's surface, still glowing from the fires of destruction, and their fleet is greeted by the Terran ships already waiting. The battle is swift and brutal. The Terran fleet emerges from the shadows, and in minutes the remnants of the Zenith forces are scattered across space. Their ships are no match for the Terran weapons, which bypass even their most advanced shields and defenses. The Zenith commanders try desperately to reorganize, but they are hopelessly outgunned. The Terran fleet moves like a perfect storm, obliterating anything in its path, leaving no room for escape. The surviving ships flee the system only to report back that the planet is lost. The Terrans have claimed Thraxar without mercy. The message is clear to the rest of the galaxy: resistance is futile, and any attempt to stand against the Fukoff force will be met with total destruction. The leaders of the galactic powers can only watch in horror as the galaxy they once ruled begins to crumble beneath the weight of the Terran advance. The question now is no longer if they will be next, but when and how much of their world will remain when the Terrans are finished. The defeat of Thraxar sends shockwaves across the galaxy as the remnants of the galactic powers scramble to regroup and prepare for the inevitable onslaught. The Zenith Dominion, the Vraxian Empire, and the Elcor Collective are all left licking their wounds, struggling to understand how they were so completely overwhelmed. The Terran Fukoff force, having decimated a once thriving trade hub and reduced it to ash, continues to advance with cold precision. But this time, the leaders of the galaxy will not wait for their own annihilation. Desperation drives them into action as they form a fragile alliance to confront the Terran threat, an alliance born not from trust, but from the shared fear of a common enemy. In the heart of the Vraxian Empire, General Orcs convenes with his highest-ranking officers. The mood is grim, and the air is thick with tension. "We can no longer afford to wait," he growls, his fist slamming onto the table. "We must strike before they get any closer. We've seen their power, their speed, and their ruthlessness. We need to hit them with everything we've got. It's our only chance." His words are met with silence, and the faces around the table are marked by uncertainty. The Vraxians are warriors, yes, but they are also practical. They know that this won't be like any other conflict they've faced before. "We need information," says a voice from across the room. The Elcor representative, tall, steps forward, his voice calm and calculated. "Our fleet is not enough. We have spies, operatives who can infiltrate their ranks and gather intel. If we can learn even a fraction of their strategy or technology, we may have a chance to fight back." The Zenith delegation remains silent, their faces strained. Their empire is in ruins, their military shattered. The idea of espionage is their only lifeline, but they know it will be dangerous. The Terrans, after all, are not only technologically advanced, they're also master tacticians who've already shown they can anticipate every move. The risk of sending infiltrators into Terran space is immense, but it's the only hope left. "We'll proceed with caution," Orcs agrees, albeit reluctantly. "But we cannot allow ourselves to be caught unprepared again. This time, we strike first." The plan is set into motion. A team of elite spies from each faction is assembled, and they're sent deep into the heart of Terran-controlled space. Their mission: infiltrate, learn, and sabotage. They are given little more than a sliver of hope and a heavy burden. As they slip through the shadows of enemy territory, the galaxy watches and waits, praying for some kind of breakthrough. But as the espionage mission unfolds, the Terran presence only grows stronger. In each sector they occupy, the Terrans are systematically dismantling local resistance, not through brute force alone, but with an uncanny ability to anticipate every move. Their spies are everywhere, infiltrating government networks, subverting local militias, and causing chaos from within. It becomes clear that the Terrans are not only superior on the battlefield, but they also possess an unparalleled ability to manipulate and control information. Each strike, each subtle maneuver, is calculated with terrifying precision. The Galactic Alliance is left scrambling as the first reports begin to filter in from their operatives. The information they've gathered is both revelatory and horrifying. The Terran technology is far beyond anything the galaxy has ever seen. Weapons that can pierce the most advanced shields, ships that can phase through detection systems, and a new kind of energy source that powers their entire fleet. A source that seems almost alive. It's no wonder the Terrans move as they do. They have mastered a form of warfare that transcends traditional tactics. They're not simply fighting. They're manipulating the very fabric of the galaxy itself. The final piece of the puzzle falls into place when the spies report a chilling discovery. The Terrans are not here to negotiate. They are here to dominate. And the only way to stop them is to understand their weaknesses, if such weaknesses even exist. The galaxy's leaders are left with one gut-wrenching realization. The Terrans are a force of nature, and the only question now is whether the galactic powers can adapt fast enough to prevent their total annihilation. As the Alliance grows more desperate, the question that haunts every leader's mind is no longer how to defeat the Terrans, it's whether they can survive their coming storm. The tension in the galaxy reaches a breaking point as the leaders of the Allied forces, Zenith, Vraxian, and Elkur, prepare for their final attempt to counter the Terran threat. With the last of their combined fleets ready for battle, the decision is made to launch a massive counteroffensive to drive the Terrans back. But as the fleets gather and the plans are laid, there is a growing sense of dread among the commanders. They have learned too much about the Terrans in recent weeks, and what they have discovered is not comforting. The Terrans are not just masters of warfare, they have become the embodiment of it. Their fleet is now seen as an unstoppable juggernaut, their tactics seemingly perfect, their technology too advanced to even comprehend. The Alliance, made up of the galaxy's most powerful factions, sets its sights on a pivotal system, the strategic heart of Terran territory. The combined fleets of the Zenith Dominion, the Vraxian Empire, and the Elkur Collective converge, ready for a confrontation that could decide the fate of the galaxy. For once, they are united in a singular cause, but the reality of what they are up against weighs heavily on each commander's shoulders. The Terrans have already proven they can anticipate every move, every tactic, and every strategy. Their spies are everywhere, and their technology is unfathomable. Despite this, the Alliance presses forward, determined to push back the Terran forces or die trying. But as the combined fleets arrive in the system, they are greeted by an eerie calm. For a moment, there is no sign of the Terran warships. The commanders breathe a collective sigh of relief, but it's short-lived. They know the Terrans never play by the rules of conventional warfare, and as soon as they begin their approach, the storm strikes. Terran ships appear from every direction, slipping through the darkness like shadows. The fleets are caught completely off guard as the first wave of Terran vessels makes its move. The battle begins not with a series of violent exchanges, but with a precise, calculated strike on the heart of the Alliance's formation. Entire squadrons of ships are reduced to smoldering wreckage within minutes. The Terrans don't engage in prolonged dogfights. They hit hard and fast, crippling the Alliance's forces before they even have a chance to retaliate. The Vraxian flagship, the Dread Harbinger, is the first to fall. A single Terran warship, appearing out of nowhere, launches an attack that splits the Vraxian cruiser in two with terrifying efficiency. No warning, no time to react. The ship is gone before it can even send out a distress signal. The destruction of the Dread Harbinger sends shockwaves through the remaining Vraxian fleet, shaking their morale to its core. The Zenith and Elkur ships, already in disarray, are now vulnerable to the onslaught. But the Terrans aren't just destroying ships, they are dismantling the very will of the Alliance. With each strike, they leave behind not just ruins, but psychological devastation. The Terran fleet is everywhere at once, appearing and vanishing in the blink of an eye. Their weapons strike with such accuracy that it's impossible to predict where the next hit will land. Any effort to regroup is met with instant punishment. As the battle rages on, the leaders of the Alliance realize something that shakes them to their core. They are not just fighting an enemy, they are fighting a force of nature, one that operates beyond the boundaries of traditional warfare. The Terrans are not just soldiers, they are predators, and the galaxy is their hunting ground. Despite the overwhelming odds, a handful of ships manage to survive the initial wave of attacks, but they are no longer the powerful fleet they once were. The remnants of the Alliance fleet retreat, their numbers decimated, their morale shattered. The Terrans, having made their point, do not pursue them further. They have already won. Back at the command center of the Terran fleet, the leaders make their final broadcast, a simple message that rings through the galaxy, echoing with the weight of an undeniable truth. We gave you a chance to leave. Now you will learn what happens when you try to fight us. In the aftermath of the battle, the surviving leaders of the galactic powers are left to pick up the pieces of their shattered empires. The Terrans have proven that no matter how great the galaxy's combined forces may be, they are powerless against the might of the Fukoff force. And now, more than ever, the galaxy faces a new reality, one where the Terrans have ascended beyond what anyone could have imagined, and the old powers of the galaxy are nothing more than pawns in their game. The question no longer remains whether they can defeat the Terrans. It's whether they can even survive their rule. The destruction of the Alliance fleet reverberates across the galaxy, and the once proud powers of the Zenith Dominion, the Vraxian Empire, and the Elcor Collective are left in ruins. The surviving leaders of these great empires convene in an emergency summit, their faces weary, their voices filled with a hollow resignation. The Terrans have proven their dominance, not just through their overwhelming military power, but through the sheer psychological toll of their relentless warfare. Entire worlds are left trembling, and the question on everyone's mind is no longer if the Terrans will strike again, but when, and whether there is any hope of stopping them. In the dimly lit chamber, the leaders sit in silence, each struggling with their own thoughts. The Zenith High Command speaks first, their representative, Commander Krulfar, voice cracking with frustration. "We have nothing left. Our fleets are destroyed, our colonies in chaos, and our people are beginning to question if it's even worth resisting. We lost Thraxar, we lost our fleets, and now, our pride. The Terrans have made us look like children, and we're powerless to stop them." Across the room, the Vraxian General Orak clenches his fists, the rage bubbling beneath the surface. "We will not kneel to them. The galaxy belongs to the strong, and we are not weak." He glares at the Elcor representative, tall, whose eyes remain as cold and calculating as ever. "But we cannot win this war alone. We need more than just courage. We need strategy, something we've been lacking since the Terrans emerged. We must find their weakness." Tall, the ever-calm Elcor strategist, leans forward. Their weakness is not in their technology, nor in their military might. It is in their arrogance. They think they can break us, force us into submission without consequence. But they have underestimated something they cannot quantify: our unity. The room goes quiet at the mention of unity, a concept that seemed all but lost when their fleets were destroyed. But Tall's words strike a chord. The Terrans, with all their strength, have never faced true unity. The galactic powers may have been fractured, but now, after the devastating blow they've received, they have no choice but to come together, to put aside their differences and form a united front. One final effort to challenge the Terrans. "We need to make them understand that they cannot simply walk all over us," Tall continues. "We will fight back, not with the remnants of our fleets, but with the heart of our people. If we strike at their core, we may yet show them that they cannot erase us." The idea is controversial, risky, and undoubtedly dangerous. The galactic powers are too weak to engage the Terran fleet head-on. Instead, the new plan is to focus on the Terran supply lines, their communication networks, and their infrastructure, to strike at the unseen threads that hold the Fukoff force together. The leaders agree, knowing that they have no other choice. The battle for the galaxy is not over. It has merely entered a new, darker phase. Meanwhile, the Terran fleet, secure in their dominance, remains silent for a time. The galaxy holds its breath, waiting for the next move. The Terrans have no need for diplomacy. They have no desire to negotiate. They've made their point clear: respect or perish. But as the surviving leaders plan their counteroffensive, a new message from the Terrans suddenly cuts through the silence. It is simple, as always, but this time there is something different in the tone. "We gave you a chance to leave. Now we will show you what happens when you wake us from our slumber. The galaxy is ours. You cannot win." The transmission ends, leaving a heavy weight in the air. There is no question anymore. The Terrans believe they have already won. But the leaders of the galactic powers, with their last remaining strength, prepare to rise again. The Terrans may have shattered their fleets, but they have not yet shattered their resolve. And in the shadow of the Terran onslaught, a new alliance begins to form, one built not on hope, but on the desperate will to survive. The Terrans may control the stars, but they have yet to learn the power of the galaxy's united fury. The galaxy is on the edge of collapse, but in the shadow of Terran dominance, something stirs. The alliance of the Zenith, Phyraxians, and Elcor, once fractured and defeated, has begun to rise again, not as independent empires, but as a unified front forged by desperation and survival. The leaders of the galaxy's remnants have set aside their bitter rivalries and formed a last-ditch coalition to fight the Terran invaders. With the knowledge they have gathered from infiltrating the Terran infrastructure, they know that they are playing their final hand. They can no longer rely on conventional tactics or brute force. They must outthink and outmaneuver the Terrans, whose overwhelming might has made them the undisputed rulers of the galaxy. The plan, however, is a desperate gamble. The Terrans, after all, do not simply conquer, they annihilate. Every resistance, every attempt at rebellion is crushed without mercy. The remnants of the galaxy's greatest powers know that even if their counteroffensive is successful, they will be wiped out in the end. But they also understand that there is no choice. It is either fight or die. At the heart of this coalition is a massive strike force, the most powerful fleet the galaxy has ever assembled. The combined armadas of the Zenith, Phyraxians, and Elcor are scattered, with their numbers weakened by the Terran onslaught. But their resolve is stronger than ever. The new plan hinges on one untested theory, that the Terrans, despite their incredible technological superiority, are not invulnerable. There is a flaw in their systems, something that hasn't yet been discovered, but it's their last hope. The plan begins with a coordinated strike against a vital Terran facility on the remote planet of Glacius, located deep in Terran-controlled space. The Terrans have long relied on it as a central hub for their supply lines and fleet coordination. The Coalition believes that if they can infiltrate the facility and disable its operations, they can disrupt the entire Terran war machine, creating a fracture in the seemingly invincible force. A small team of elite operatives, drawn from each of the three factions, is assembled for this mission. Their goal is clear: get in, find the weakness, and destroy the Terran hub. It's a suicide mission, but it is the only chance left. As the strike force approaches Glacius, the tension is palpable. The Terrans know they are coming. They've seen the signs of an impending attack. The battle is inevitable, and the Coalition's operatives are ready to do whatever it takes. The Terran forces, fully aware of the growing resistance, have fortified the planet with a fearsome defense. Their ships, sleek and deadly, swarm the skies above Glacius, intercepting any incoming threat with ruthless precision. But the Coalition fighters, their spirits galvanized by the failure of every attempt to resist the Terran reign, are undeterred. The initial phase of the attack is brutal. The Terran defenses are far stronger than anticipated, and the Coalition forces suffer heavy casualties as they push forward. But the Terrans, despite their unmatched technology, make one critical misstep. They underestimate the desperation and unity of the surviving factions. For the first time, the Alliance moves as one, adapting their tactics and exploiting every gap in the Terran defense with terrifying precision. The elite team lands on Glacius, moving swiftly and silently through the snow-covered landscape. They infiltrate the Terran facility, using the knowledge they've gathered from their previous espionage efforts. The stakes couldn't be higher. If they fail, the galaxy will fall under the Terran boot, never to rise again. Inside the facility, they find what they've been searching for: a vulnerability in the Terran supply chain, a flaw in their energy grid that powers their fleets and infrastructure. With seconds to spare, the team detonates the explosive charges that will send shockwaves through the Terran network, crippling their operations. The explosion sends ripples of destruction across the planet, and the Terran fleet responds with a fury never before seen. But as the Coalition fighters retreat, the Terrans' perfect war machine stumbles. Their fleets begin to falter, their supply lines severed, their coordination thrown into chaos. The Terrans are still a terrifying force, but for the first time since their invasion began, they show signs of vulnerability. The Alliance has succeeded, at least for now. The message spreads quickly across the galaxy. The Terrans can bleed. Their dominance can be challenged. The battle is far from over, and the odds remain staggering. But the Terran grip on the galaxy is no longer as certain as it once was. The remaining powers of the galaxy, once on the brink of extinction, now see a glimmer of hope. The Terrans have underestimated the strength of the United Galaxies they sought to dominate, and for the first time in years, the galaxy's people know that victory, however distant, may be within reach. The Terrans have come to conquer, but the galaxy is beginning to rise against them. The war is far from over, but the tides have shifted, and this time, the Terrans might find themselves facing an enemy they cannot simply crush underfoot. The fight for the galaxy is about to take a new turn.